again with the Land Raider. We've got all the decals on it. I'll just put some bits on it so you can see what it looks like. We've got the base paint done. We've got a layer of clear on there, pretty much ready to weather it down. So that's what it's looking like at the moment. It's a bit shiny because of the clear coat. When we're finished, we'll put a matte coat on there to take that shine off. I've gone ahead and glued these pieces on there because they're not coming off again. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is do some sponge chipping around some of the kind of high contact areas. Let me show you how I do that. I have here some sponge from Pluck Foam and a hemostat. All I do is I grab foam with the hemostat so that I get an edge. This is a really cheap tile I use as a palette. I'm going to use some basalt grey. Put some down on the palette, like this, and I get the paint in there. But I also take a large quantity of it off. You can see the kind of marks I get. And those are the kind of marks that on the edge of the model. Can you see that? Very subtle. You can put as much or as little as you want on. Helps to weather down the surfaces. And I'm not going to put any of this on the black paint. I'll use the base colour for that. Let me just go for, like I say, the high traffic areas. The advantage being that it naturally picks up on raised areas if you keep a kind of flat aspect to the sponge. One thing you've got to be careful not to do, you've got to always dab with it. If you stroke with it, you'll get a smear of stripes, and that's just not going to look right. Revisit the body of the tank here. So these front edges are going to take some heavy hammer. Okay, I'm going to call that quits. So, new piece of sponge, and I'm going to take some black paint I'm not going to need a lot of this. I'm just going to take the decal here, I'm just going to touch the decal with the black paint. Just so that there's some chips in that paint, and especially here where it goes over a corner. just to add some weathering to the decals. Used to make my own washers for this. I used to use burnt umber oil paint and turpentine, and kind of get really into mixing my own. But fortunately, MIG now make pre-made washers. It's going to go on quite heavy, and then a lot of it's going to be lifted off. So it is as simple as just attacking them all with the wash. But you will see that because there is a turpentine, there's a layer of clear on here, that we can get this to run into the recesses. And once this is dried, or even before it's dried, we're able to take a large amount of that off again, so that it just sits in recesses. And the brown is a lovely counterpoint, I think anyway, to the there's a lot of grey on this model, a lot of blue grey on the model, and the warm browns are a lovely counterpoint to that. Okay, so now this is mostly dry. You can still see it's got some moisture, some pooling in there, but I want to get rid of a lot of that anyway. So the next step is to take some thinner on a damp brush. So I'm going to take a lot of that off on the side there, and then I'm just going to dry brush. I'm working with a damp brush, and you should be able to see that with a damp brush I can move this pigment around, and it can help me create some interesting streaks, patterns. I can lighten up some of the damage I've got, take some chunks out, and I can give some streaks to what remains. going to let that dry completely and give it another coat of clear before we move on to the next step. So that's the MIG wash on there, kind of reduced to a more usable level, and sealed again. So I've given it another spray with clear and I've sealed it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put some corrosion on. I'm going to use some of the new Citadel Technicals. This is going mostly on the tracks, I think, and this is going to hit some of the bronze areas, and try and put a bit of life and an extra kind of point colour into the model. And this is quite thin already, so I don't know if I'm going to need to thin that down at all. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on an area kind of around the back here. Just get some more light over onto there. I'll put it on the back here and see see if I think I need to thin that anymore. That is actually quite thick. Just some water on the job. So yeah, I am going to be thinning that. Just spread that around a little. Even though it is quite thin, I am going to just pop some on my tile with a little drip of water in it, just to help thin that down some more. There we have that. I'm going to hit the treads with some Typhus Corrosion. Let's see what that does. And again, I'm going to start with an out of the way patch just to see what I think. If I don't like what I get, I'll thin it down. If I still don't like what I get, I'll retreat. So let's try track down the bottom here. Again, I'm going to need to thin that more. Okay, thinned down, I think I can live with that. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to put some oil onto my palette. It is a lot like using, again, making a comparison to Vallejo. It's basically Vallejo smoke, but it's already a little thinner than smoke. Smoke can be very, very heavy. This isn't that heavy out of the gate, so it'll help to just add some dirt into the tracks. to. So it's time to put a little mud and dirt around the bottom of the vehicle. So to do this, I'm going to use a pigment fixer. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to wash some of this on, which will go in the recesses. When it dries, it will look like dried on dirt. Once I've done that and that's dried, I'll go back in with just some raw pigment and I'll brush that into some areas, and then I'll fix that in place. So let's make a little wash first. So I take some pigment, and then I take some fixer, and you can make this as thin or as thick as you like. I tend to want a thinner wash. You can also, there is a product called, what's it called? I think it's called plastic putty. That's the Vallejo version anyway. There's a much thicker product which allows you to make a paste with the pigment, and you can then use that to kind of properly go on and simulate mud. Now this is going to dry very, very differently to what it looks like when it first goes on, and it's going to be able to brush off. So at the moment I've made a kind of a brown liquid. It's very thin. And I'm just going to test that again on an area that's quite out of sight. Yeah, that's fine. And so I'm going to run that into the tracks, up against the edge of the vehicle. The last thing I'm going to do, I need both hands to do, so I'm going to have to prop this. There we go, so you can see what I'm doing. And so what I'm doing is I'm loading up the brush. I'm taking off an awful lot of the excess there, like that. And then I'm just going to tap the brush. It's giving me mud splashes. Depends how heavily you want it splashed. At the moment I'm just kind of flicking this. You can flick it with the second hand. If you really want thick though, you need to take the lip of the thing and you need to flick like that. Okay. I need to let all of that dry. Once all of that's dry, I can come back and just thin some of this down a little bit, make it a little more natural. lighter coloured pigment, just to give it a layer of dry mud over the top. So quite generous with this and just kind of use it to blend the tones in. So I've been around most of the vehicle, just working in with dry mud over the top of the wet. Still got some pockets of moisture in there, but that's alright. You can see you end up with this kind of look. Take a clean brush. Anyway, you don't want that to sit, we can just work down, get rid of it. I just need to put some over here. Okay, and there we go for the mud. So the last few things to do, I'm going to put a few oil stains and soot stains on it. I'm going to use a mix of brush and airbrush to do that. I'm going to use some black paint, and I do still have some of this rare commodity. I have some of the brown ink. What I'll do when that runs out is try some Winsor & Newton brown ink or something similar. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just put some oil stains on. So I'm going to put a few drops, literally a few drops of brown ink into the airbrush barrel. Turn on the airbrush. Back of the vehicle, so where we have the light, where we have pretty much all I'm going to do for oil. I'm just going to rinse that out. So now I'm just going to do the barrels. I'm actually just going to thin down the black very simply. I'm not going to use medium, I'm just going to use water and flow aid, because this it doesn't need to be thin enough to run through the brush for a long time. I just need a few quick blasts of this. So, small amount into the airbrush. So push on. So it's running fine. So I'm going to shoot past these. The muzzle's just darkening down a little. A bit of carboning. Here again. going to do, I'm also going to do the tips here, but in order to do that, I'm just going to make sure I've got something to protect just the back of the vehicle while I do the front here. See all that overspray that would otherwise have gone onto the Land Raider. I didn't want that. Okay. There we go. Carbon scoring done. So the last thing to do are the lenses and lights.